Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Alice, and welcome to Happy Talks. Here is my lovely co-host, Donovan, and today we have a special guest, Jayne Sanders, who is a purpose coach, and she has some unique and fascinating work that I know you would all love to learn about. So please welcome Jayne. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Yeah. So why don't we just start by our usual question we asked our guests is, what's your story and what led you to what you're doing now as a purpose coach?
So I'm past corporate, MBA, and I've had 3 careers prior to this one. Was successful, but would always hit a wall where I wasn't happy. I was bored, unfulfilled. I knew I was supposed to be doing something else. Just couldn't figure it out. Worked with a career coach, read all the books, filled out all the forms. Maybe I'm dense, but it still wasn't helpful for me. Finally got one of those proverbial wake-up calls, a cosmic 2-before. And my parents died 3 months apart. And it was just a real whoa, life is short. I need to figure this out. So I started Googling, how do I find my life purpose? Because I knew that's what I was missing, was the articulation of my purpose. And, went here and there for a while and then ran across a headline for a teleseminar, and it said, discover your innate life purpose. And I was like, I couldn't click on that puppy fast enough. And first words I saw were hand analysis. And I was so disappointed because I'm like, oh, come on, palm reading's fun. There are very good palm readers, but it's not going to give me what I need. And then I saw the word scientific. So it was scientific hand analysis. That word helped me put my anal MBA skepticism aside. So I listened to the teleseminar. It was pretty credible. I really wanted my purpose. So I had a hand analysis done. Oh my gosh, it blew my mind, changed my life. I mean, it answered questions I didn't even know I had. It was like, oh, no wonder that worked, but that didn't work. And no wonder I liked that, but I didn't like that. And no wonder I'm confused. And this makes so much sense. And now I know where to take action. Which I did. I mean, I was so lit up and inspired even before I knew how to put my purpose into work, what it would look like. And taking action on the information in my hands led me to the right place, gave me clarity, opened doors, got connected with the right people. And a few months later, I'm like, good grief, if I was so on fire before I even knew what my purpose work looked like, I want to help people feel like that. So I studied it for 5 years, started doing it right away, but I'm as highly certified as possible. I'm certified to teach it. I'm a master, which is the sheer number of hand analysis that I performed, gotten 3 coaching certifications that all work together with my clients. I'm a purpose coach, law of attraction coach, and spiritual life coach, because even if I'm helping somebody identify their ideal work, we are 360 people. We're not in notches, right? So everything's connected. So I found my purpose finally, and that's now what I do for others, and I love it. I'm on purpose now.
Yeah, I can tell that you're really fired up about it, right? Like that sense of purpose comes through in the way that you're talking about it. So this is not a topic I really know anything about. I would love to get a little bit more into some of the details, probably kind of parse out some of the, like you were saying, some of the surface level things, right? That people go, what is this? What is this hand analysis stuff? What's going on here? So I would love to just hear some more on that angle.
Sure. No, and you're in the majority, Donovan, because most people have never heard of it. I'm trying to change that, but it is scientific. The lines in your hands actually mimic the neural pathways in your brain. The gentleman that created this spent 40 years and analyzed over 30,000 hands, which is more subjects than any FDA approved drug out there. and it's a database. Anybody can learn it. You know, palm reading is dependent on the intuitive level of the reader. This anybody can learn and do. The gentleman wrote a book about part of it, and because it's a huge database. My binder is about that thick, so it's bigger than my head. And a neurosurgeon wrote the foreword to that book, a neurosurgeon from Stanford who was using scientific hand analysis with his patients. And Forbes wrote an article about it. I met the reporter at a conference, did a little bitty mini reading for her, which I do all the time for people because it demonstrates the accuracy. It's like 3 minutes. Still, they can't remember it all. That's how much information comes forward. And she was just blown away like I was. And she said, I'm thinking about collaborating with this guy who's very well known in the internet marketing world. And if you do a hand analysis for us and tell us who should be doing which aspects of this project and what we need to watch out for working together, and if it makes sense to me, I'll write an article. She wrote the article. So yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, that's a cool, kind of.
I was just agreeing, like, yeah, that's a pretty interesting story. Although I just kind of, so there's lines in our hands that match up with like types of personality is what you're saying. And that kind of like.
Well, there are. Yeah. So everything matters, by the way. Yeah. Everything means something, not just the lines. A lot of information comes from fingerprints.
Yeah.
The shape of your hand, where your fingers are set on the palm, how the fingers relate to each other, and everything means something. So taken all together, scientific hand analysis reveals pretty much everything about who you are and why you're here. How you're meant to make a difference in the world. It's not a job description. That would be cuckoo. Yeah. But it is the most specific, but at the same time, comprehensive description of the concept behind your ideal work. And everybody has options, right? So for example, I would guess that likely somewhere in your prints, because I use hand prints. I have clients in 10 different countries. I don't meet face to face. I use hand prints and we work on Zoom. Somewhere in your hands would be something about group communication or verbal communication as one of your gifts or one of the ways that you're meant to make a difference, or some permutation of that, because things can show up in different ways. So personality related to the lines, the uppermost horizontal line across your hand that starts under the pinky and goes across and it ends in different places, but that's your relationship style, for example. How it's called your heart line, but it how you communicate in relationship, any kind of relationship, how you express love and affection, how you prefer love and affection expressed to you. And it is one of the more general things in the hands. There's only 4 basic types. And usually people are a combination, but not always. So that can be related to personality. You know, and anything in the hands is either something that happened in the past or is going on currently. Palm reading is future, how many kids, when you're going to get married, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nothing, no predictions with hand analysis.
Yeah.
Other than, I don't care how good your life is now, if you take action on the information in your hands, it will get better. So it's kind of freaky. That's the word that people use. Freaky accurate.
Yeah. What are the 4, like for the love line or the relationship line?
Yeah.
What are the 4 types? I'd be curious.
Sure. Probably the most common is the big heart.
The big heart. Okay.
Which is just exactly that. It's about helping people, loving, nurturing. They can express love and affection any way they want. And by the way, everything in the hands has a master path and a student path. Where we want to be is the master path. but nobody can be there 100% of the time on every marking, on any marking, because we're humans, right? We're works in progress. So the student path of the big heart is overgiving because they so much want to help, and being receiving challenged, not asking for help enough, not taking it when it's offered. You know, oh no, I got it. That kind of thing.
My partner.
Second most common would be a hermit or a social hermit. And people go, ew, I don't want to be a hermit. Well, I have hermit and big heart. And man, I love my hermit. It's somebody that keeps their deepest feelings close in until they trust, but they're very loyal. They require alone time. They need a lot of freedom. Anybody trying to possess or control a hermit, it's just not going to work. Master path, they have high integrity, high reliability. They can be romantic, not so mushy. Favorite way of communicating love and affection is doing things, acts of service. And their primary student path is trust issues, because hermits don't get flakes. They just, because they're not flaky. Third most common would be passionate, and they're just passionate about life, very outgoing, sometimes the life of the party, you know, lampshade on the head. A lot of fun, little dramatic, which is part of what makes them fun. Passionates want what they want, and they want it now. And they're not afraid to ask for it. So they model for others how to ask for what you want. And then the fourth is romantic idealist, which is somebody who's in their head a lot about their emotions. They like thinking about them and analyzing them, which makes them very considerate in relationship because they're thinking about it a lot. And their primary challenge is being in their head too much and not letting themselves feel their emotions and feelings. So that's a real quick and dirty of the 4 relationship types. Things in your hands can change. You know, of course, the fingerprints won't, or the FBI being deep doo-doo, right? So we're born with some very important information. Other things in your hands and other things about you can change. My hands, so since I started this work, both of my heart lines when I started were hermits, and I had pieces of big heart, but both of them have grown from a hermit that went to about here all the way to a big heart, which goes all the way up to the index finger or just inside. When you look at it, you can only see the hermit. See how you can only see it go to here? But if you look really close, it goes all the way now, because all I'm doing all day long is helping people. What was your question, Donovan? Sorry.
Well, that was a strangely predictive extra set of answers, because well, basically what I was going to ask is to try to, you know, bring it up to kind of a high level, which is, you know, it sounds like it is basically the idea is you have some certain set of genetics, and then it's, you know, mapped into your brain, but also mapped into your hands to some degree. And I was going to ask if it is fully dependent on things that are static or not. But you already answered that, so I might have to come up with a different question. No, I do have another thing that I was curious about. So that kind of helps me understand a little bit what we're looking at, right? Some of the different breakdowns or options or things. How does this approach sort of work? So, for example, let's say I come to you. I say, I don't know what I'm doing. I need some help. What are kind of some of the steps that you do? Because right now we have sort of categories, and I'm not quite clear on how we use them yet.
So, and I'm not 100% clear in your question, so I'm going to answer it from 2 perspectives. The how is, as I mentioned, using handprints. So if you came to me, I would mail you a handprint kit, which tells you how to do it, includes the ink sheets. You take your prints, mail them back to me, and then we set up 2 hour-long Zoom calls. So there's a lot of value in this, a lot of my time involved, loving every minute of it. And the first hour is the analysis, which I've already prepared in advance. You get the recording, and I'm showing you the markings in your hand that I'm talking about. That's why I like Zoom. And then the second call is for your questions after you've watched the recording, because you just can't take it all in. And your brain is like, I'll say something and you'll start thinking about how it applies to your life and how it's showing up. And I keep talking. right? So the second call, I think, is very important, and it can range from 15 minutes to an hour, but everybody has up to an hour, and a recording of that as well, and a summary report of your analysis. Now the how, so it identifies your innate purpose, how you're meant to make a difference in the world, the gifts you have, the talents you have to help you fulfill that purpose, and the blind spots that are tripping you up in life and keeping you from that deeper and more consistent joy and fulfillment and success on your terms that I think are possible only when you're in alignment with your purpose. So people come to me who are unhappy in their work but don't know what else to do. Entrepreneurs who love their work but they're not making the money they want to make. I can tell them where to take action to help with that. People that just are unhappy in any part of their lives, because again, we're 360 creatures. And that's also why I got the life coaching certification, and law of attraction helps everybody anywhere, anyhow. So it depends on their goals. I'm not going to help somebody grow their business, from 6 figures to 7 figures. I'm not a business coach, but I've started 2 successful businesses of my own, so I can help people get the idea and kind of push them out of the gate. But it helps people feel validated and confident and gives them direction. I mean, it's like a blueprint to their best life. It's the highest potential. So it's deep, profound, life-changing if you take action on it.
Yeah, I think that answers most of the question I was asking. So Let me run it back to you and see if what I say maps. Okay. So it sounds like I come in, you send me this kit. I kind of get my hands on it. However I do it, I'm going to slaughter the terminology because I don't know what's going on. But don't worry about it. I get my fingerprints on there. I send it into you. You do a big workup and analysis before we ever talk again. But then we do, after that's done, we go over some of those pieces. You might say, again, this might be completely opposite. Say, I see this sort of thing. This seems like the kind of thing that should provide you purpose. Here's the other piece of it that might be causing you some strain or struggle. I think you mentioned something about like giving, right? Like giving might be one of the big purpose lines, but maybe you're over giving and finding some struggles there. Sort of the conversation unfolds like that. There's a reflection period, and then comes back for another conversation to kind of work through some of those things. Where am I? Does that sound right, or what am I missing?
Well, kind of, sort of. The analysis itself is going to give you languaging around the difference you're meant to make in the world. And the talents, special talents that you have to help you do that. And then lots of different ways that we get tripped up. And most people who've done any self-awareness at all aren't shocked by the trip up points. They may be surprised by how much they're being impacted by them and not seeing it. So it's very specific. And the giving thing, that's a heart line. So, some possible. So the purpose statement, I do a foundation and then an expanded version. So this can be pretty long depending on what's in somebody's hand. But there are dozens of purpose options, dozens. It's not like just there's 10 or 6 or, 11, dozens. And then any combination of those dozens. So it depends on, I don't want to get into too much detail and confuse people, but I just want to give you some of the options of the real basic. So somebody could be a visionary leader. Somebody could be a mentor, a business person, a healer, an artist, a passionate advocate, which, anyway, you tell me where you want more, but those are just some of the real basics. There's lots of options for purpose.
It kind of sounds, and I'm sure you can help us make the distinction, when you were describing the various types of people, it sounded very similar to the Myers-Briggs personality types. that a lot of people use to kind of figure out
Right.
the type of person that they are. So what's different about it? What's similar? Like,
Great
what
question.
distinguishes it from each other?
So I've done Myers-Briggs 3 times. I think it can be very helpful, but I came out with 3 different results. So scientific hand analysis is completely independent of how somebody interprets questions, the mood they're in when they take the test, how they answer the questions. And Myers-Briggs does not identify purpose.
Yeah.
It's strengths.
Yeah.
And some personality. So, you know, and not to knock Myers-Briggs, it has its place. And so does DISC and Strength Finders and all these other assessments, but none of them identify purpose, and none of them are independent of what the person thinks or says or feels. Nobody has to say a word. I just need their handprints.
Right. Yeah. That's more objective than
Very
subjective based on the interpretation of the questions.
And people buy into it because of that, because they know it's more objective.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
So on that note, you mentioned that it's possible that you may see some things sort of change a little bit over time. I'm just curious if how that distinction kind of works its way in. Like you mentioned that it's a reading of the past, right? So I'm just curious.
Current. It's current, past and current. Yeah,
I'm curious how these pieces all come together.
Well, so I see what I see. So I don't know if it's past or current, except there are a couple markings that are childhood related, if you have them, and usually challenges in some form. There's no future stuff. It's just current. And as far as changes, for example, there are possible markings in the hands called gift markings, which are very important because they're unusual. Now, I'm going to contradict myself and say the vast majority of my clients have gift markings because I have gift markings, so I attract people with gift markings. But they're very important. Those can come and go, and we often earn the gifts through life experiences. So, for example, if you went through something where you needed some guts, man, you needed some courage to get through that challenge, you may earn a extra courage gift marking, a gift marking that means you have extra potential courage. So yeah. And I don't think people need more than one hand analysis. Even if their hands change, it would be just a little bit and wouldn't make that much of a difference. Others disagree and will say, well, I can only give you so much in one reading, so come every year. That's not my philosophy. I'm so comprehensive when I give one. It's like,
so it sounds like it's more, just more consistent. And that makes sense too, because I was thinking in terms of, we had that other conversation of, hey, what if you end up as a completely different thing or a completely different type, going back to that other test. But it sounds like what it is it's, 90% the same, and a couple little details might jump around, and maybe that's not the right number. But for the most part, you're going to get almost exactly the same things out of every individual reading.
If it's by the same person. Some readers, some analysts interpret things differently, but I will say, as long as you can see the fingerprints, you get a lot of the core of who you are from your fingerprints. Something that we call the life school, which is sort of like the overarching energy of your life. The life lesson, which is the biggest student path. It's the biggest, it's the number one thing keeping us from that deeper and more consistent joy and fulfillment. So it's really helpful to know what that is. And then the core of your life purpose, that will never change. Now, the expanded version might, if gift markings come and go, but, that's why it's important that we see the fingerprints clearly, which we usually can. And what we get from fingerprints, from handprints, is not clear enough to steal your identity. So don't anybody worry about that.
Okay. I'm curious though, so are you looking at both hands? So both, I would feel like there's variation between hands. So
there is.
Are there, how does that work, I guess?
Yeah, good question. Generally, right hand is what the world sees. It's like our business. It's what we show to the world. Generally, left hand is inner personal stuff and family stuff, close-knit community stuff.
Mm-hmm. What if we're
But
left-handed?
some of that changes, some of that flips, but this guy was so, talk about anal, so thorough that that's already in the database.
Wow.
A lot of that's already in the information. And if I see something on left hand and I think it matters, whether it's out in the world or in you, then I ask if you're right or left-handed, and then interpret it that way. So yeah, it's really pretty amazing stuff.
So I had a little bit of a question kind of going back to the way you just brought up that database part, right? I don't think I got a very good understanding of what was going on there. So it sounded like, and maybe you can fill in some of this, but it sounds like there was someone who studied this type of stuff a lot, filled out a lot of information about it. I think I'm missing the piece of like, what kind of stuff is in there? Or what, like, how does it map? Is this, you're doing kind of the readings and looking at, or the interpretation, the analysis, looking at some of the lines and whatnot, and cross-referencing that against what's in this database? Or like, how are these things connected?
That's such a great question. Yeah. I mean, he basically made a record of every possible marking and what it means. And did it so thoroughly that, for example, if he had 5 people that had this marking and had similar characteristic, then a 6th person comes up and has that marking but doesn't have the characteristic, he'd toss it out. I mean, that's how precise and robust this system is. So it's every possible marking and what it means, even sometimes in combination with other markings, because sometimes that can change the original interpretation a little bit. That's why it takes so long to study. I mean, you know, I studied it 5 years. I mean, you don't have to, but you can learn the fingerprint system in a, like, say, a 3-day workshop, but none of the other stuff. So it's very comprehensive, very detailed.
So you can pause me or stop me if we get out of the realm of stuff you're super familiar with. But I'm curious what the kind of methodology or the way that this database was put together was. Was it getting people together and kind of doing, like, looking at all these hands, figuring out different attributes they had, and then kind of mapping those things together? Or was it, oh, well, all right.
You just said it. Yeah. I mean, and as I mentioned, he looked at 30,000 hands. And he would document the markings and then talk to the people to see what their characteristics were. And just, I mean, 40 years, Donovan, you can imagine, that's a lot of time putting this database together and perfecting it. Right? So, amazing.
So another question on that, is it considered kind of a done deal? Like, it's set? I mean, that's a huge sample size. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Or is there still more effort being put into it, more kind of data being fed into that? Just
little by little, you know, like my teachers who studied under the founder have added, maybe 3 or 4 markings in the, what is this, 2021? So in the 9 years I've been doing this, just 3 or 4 markings. So this guy's amazing that he put this together. You know, just, I mean, it's like, holy moly. Look at your hands. I mean, if you look really close, there's a lot of teeny tiny lines in your hands. And some aren't important, but they still mean something. So when I do a hand analysis, I do what's important, what I think is important based on my high level education and certification in it. Because you don't have time to cover everything, and you don't need to know the stuff that's not important anyway.
So I have a question, because this actually applies to me. So I recently, like, injured my hands. I don't know if you can see. Well, not really. Injured, because I do CrossFit, and I was doing things on the bar, so I peeled. And so it's scarred pretty bad. So I'm like, are my old lines gonna come back how they are? Are they gonna change a little? Would that affect the reading? Just because
Yes.
I'm dealing with that currently, and
Well,
I blistered and then yeah. So
the main thing from that, Dr. Alice, is that when you injure your hand, where you injured it means something. So somebody says, well, I just smashed my finger in the car door. And I'm like, well, why didn't you smash this finger? You smashed that one. Right? So everything means something. So where are your scars?
It's on my left hand, at the base of the pinky and the base of the ring finger.
Okay. So the only thing, oh, sorry.
Yeah. I've had this happen though on like this hand and in my upper fingers. So it kind of moves around, but I think maybe because I'm left-handed, I grip more.
Well, the only thing I would say with that is, working out puts it in a whole different camp. So, it may change what I'm about to say because you have a propensity to get that location of at least a callus, right?
Yeah.
If not an injury. And I see a lot of men that I have calluses on their hands, from working out. If you didn't work out and you injured your hands there, let me say that.
Okay.
It would be on your left hand, your creative thinking and your ability to use inspiring communication to heal people, and this is just a real top line, is trying to get your attention. So, yeah. Or if there's a mole on your hand or, you hurt it somehow, burn your hand or whatever, but it does matter where, except I'm going to use working out as a exception because people always somehow change their hands that way if they're doing a heavy workout. Hope that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, people that come to me are like people who are getting ready to retire and want to make sure they leave their legacy that they're meant to leave. They're in transition. They lost their job or they want a different job. They're just unhappy. They feel lost, off track. They just know they're not on it in some way. Things aren't working.
Yeah, I definitely agree that people need a sense of purpose to feel happy and fulfilled in life. So if this is another tool to help them discover that for themselves, then that's great. Yeah.
And I think it's so much, and they trust it so much more than like going to a weekend workshop to create your own purpose. Because people don't trust themselves. Right? And it'll be so different that the languaging that I would use from hand analysis would be so different than what they would create.
Definitely. Great. Well, Jayne, it's been a pleasure to have you on our show. Was there anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up today?
Well, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you guys, is offer a special price for your listeners.
Sure, definitely.
Yeah, so my price is about average for somebody of my experience and qualifications, which for the whole thing, it's about 3 hours of my time totally and recordings and summary report is $497. But if somebody contacts me through my website, which you're going to have that somewhere, right?
That'll be linked in the description below.
Okay. Then I will give them $100 off that.
Awesome.
But I need to send them the link because it's not published anywhere because it's secret.
So they have to like email you directly?
Email me directly through my website at purposewhisperer.com and I'll get the link to them and help them change their life.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for being on our show.
It was really fun. You guys had great questions. I hope you're happy with it. And I just had a ball. So thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com. And if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.